at the meeting in Montreal in Canada, in Quebec. He said, how can we create corporations that shall one day give orders to governments? And that's what Bilderberg is all about. It's not one world order. It's one world company limited.
Highly organized agenda to break the back of the American free enterprise system because it stands in the way of those that have a globalist agenda. And they're succeeding. And so backed by big money, backed by the trade unionists, backed by the multinational corporations, they're all playing that game for their own reasons.
Increasingly, our utilities are under the influence of people from other parts of the world and other governments. Most of our main industries are now a majority foreign owned. Few Americans have any idea of this. And the powers that own our major industries, for the most part, favor globalization and world government. So they are, I would say, a big part of this drift toward world government.
The main event is the wholesale destruction of the world economy. Are you saying to me that Joe the plumber is more intelligent than David Rockefeller? If he's lending the money, the question is why? So you destroy the economy. And you destroy the wealth of the people because, again, you destroy the wealth of the people. You destroy the power of growth of nations and, of course, the population base.
I believe we are just one major world crisis away from having a totalitarian type of system in place. Our indebtedness here in the United States is now approximately $65 trillion in foreign obligations. It's way beyond what most people realize. It can never be repaid. And because the United States has presented a specific challenge to globalists, because the American people have always been an independent, freedom-loving people, so how do you get the United States into a global government? Well, ultimately, you have to crash their economy and make them so dependent on foreign powers that you can blackmail them to come into a system.
The thing about this is you have to have a crisis big enough for the public to be able to accept whatever the solution is. It can't be a half-baked crisis. It's like Rahm Emanuel said a few months back. The last thing you want to waste is a good crisis.
Every time we turn around, there's a new crisis. There's an economic crisis. There's a war crisis. There may be a pandemic crisis. There's a crisis everywhere you look. And as long as people are in this crisis mode, they're not very vigilant about watching what's happening to their liberties. All they're thinking about is, oh, government, do something, protect me, save us from all of this. And the government says, yes, that's exactly what we intend to do. Every time there's a new war or a threat of war, there's more motion in the direction of merging our military with other national military forces through the United Nations, so-called peacekeeping forces. So all of these crises lead to more legislation, more treaties, and a more movement in the direction of giving up our sovereignty as a nation, merging with a global structure, and the creation of that global structure into a totalitarian system.
Thanks again for coming down, Mr. Wilson. I know you're a busy man, so we'll try and keep this short. Come on and have a seat. So, for the record, your name is John Francis Wilson, and you live at 15 Clear Heights Drive. I'm sorry, could you clearly reply yes or no to my questions?
Yes, I am John Wilson. Is this being recorded?
Are you a member of the Church of God on Springer Avenue?
Yes.
Have you taken part in their pro-life meetings and marches?
Well, yes, but what does this have to do?
Plan on attending this evening's meetings with this group?
Yes.
Mr. Wilson, are you aware that it is legal in this country to have an abortion?
Well, yes, but it hasn't always been that way.
Are you aware that some healthcare providers have been attacked and murdered by members of groups like yours?
Hold on. We have nothing to do with those groups. We are peaceful people that are protesting.
Are you aware that some healthcare providers have been attacked, Mr. Wilson?
We believe in preserving life and not taking it.
Are you aware, Mr. Wilson? Yes or no? You are a member of 3 different right-to-life groups. You You are a member of a number of evangelical Christian organizations. You've donated money to Christian Science Research and the Salvation Army. You receive daily emails from radical organizations that encourage prayer for our government on matters of policy. You've signed a number of petitions supporting the traditional definition of marriage. You frequently visit websites that are pro-Israeli and others that believe in an imminent cataclysmic event. Your wife and children are also enrolled in or are talking to many other radical anti-social organizations and people, Mr. Wilson. There's a lot more here. Are these the actions of a peaceful man and his family?
I'm terrified by that thought. A global government, that would mean that the franchise we have for freedom and for allowing everybody to vote would be destroyed. The ability for our people to accept the Bill of Rights and all the freedoms guaranteed in the Bill of Rights would be destroyed, because the rest of the world doesn't have the free press like we have. And women don't vote in most of the countries in the rest of the world. You don't have a society in Japan, you're guilty until proven innocent. You don't have the right to protect yourself in your own home or even defend yourself against violent criminals in Great Britain. All those freedoms that we have today would be taken away from us. So all that a world government can do would mean that the wrong people would vote on what's right for America.
Why not have the people of the world living in unity, peace, and harmony? On the surface, it sounds good. But as you get deeper into the organizations pushing this agenda and look at where these people are coming from in the higher levels, it is a very sinister agenda. There's a lot of hatred for Christians and Jews.
Read the Quran. If a woman commits adultery, she's stoned to death. If a thief steals something, he has his hand can't be cut off. There is no ability for the compassion of Christianity to exist and make us a kinder world with either Muslim extremists, communists, or dictators. And if we had a world government, all of those thoughts, beliefs, and concepts would have to be represented, including atheism. And there are a tremendous number of people in the world who believe that not only abortion is correct, but you should be able to terminate a life up to 2 years if something's wrong with the child. There are too many different opinions that are evil for us to have a world government that's harmonious unless we give up so much of what we believe in.
You need to understand that the United Nations Charter is not based on the Constitution of the United States, sadly. In order to understand that, you need to know that, first, the Constitution of the United States, our freedoms come from God. They are not able to be numbered. They are inalienable. They can never be taken away. When you take a look at the UN Charter, our rights come from government, they are numbered, and they can be taken away for bad behavior.
If a one-world occult system comes into place, I believe we will entirely lose our freedoms to speak out, to worship freely as we will, to own property as we do now. I believe much of the world's property will be seized by the coming global government in the name of protecting the environment. Our health care system, if someone controls our health care, to a large extent they can control us. They can determine whether you live or die.
Not only is it a tyrannical form of government, but it's built around the assumption that this is all for the greater good of the greater number. So the people at the bottom who are being told what to do are educated or propagandized or whatever you want to call it to believe that, after all, this is in their own best interest.
A world government could actually dictate to a farmer what he has to grow, or maybe to get off of his land entirely and move somewhere else in order to save the environment. Maybe his piece of land will be designated special environmental property under the United Nations. That has already happened with some of our national parks, and I've seen a map that shows that ultimately as much as a third of the United States could be declared as one world property where people wouldn't have any access to it at all.
You're talking about the World Wildlife Fund. Their main objective is, again, to reduce the world's population. Prince Philip, Queen Elizabeth II's husband, he said that. He said, if I ever came back, reincarnated, I come back as a deadly virus. Well, of course he would, because that's what these people are into destroying the world society.
Now that's how one can begin to understand the real goals of the Agenda 21 Sustainable Development UN Global Plan. You see, that plan in its own expression calls for a reduction of the human population by 85%. So you begin to wonder how it is we can survive in this country when our resources are taken and put off limits for our use, whether it's mining resources or timber resources, food resources, etc. If we were to remove half of this country's land mass from productive human use, it's only a matter of time before human population begins to fall. But when we understand that that's the plan of the United Nations, we can begin to put this in a perspective that we need to be putting it in.
Maurice Strong at the UN, is like, he's a very altruistic guy. The guy thinks that, he thinks that he's doing the right thing for the most number of people by advocating that we kill off some of them because there's just too darn many of them.
I believe the whole concept of population control and diminishing the world's population to a place where we can sustain development and bringing it below 1 billion is setting the stage for mass persecution down the road. What if people actually buy into that idea, that much of the world has to be eliminated in order for those who are left to be able to continue to function? You're going to see more wars, more famines, more disease. Some of this intentionally spread to reduce the population of mankind. There's a place I visited called the Georgia Guidestones, where they present the 10 Commandments of the New Age movement in a number of different languages. And one of the commandments calls for the reduction of the population of mankind down to a fraction of what it is right now. So a thinking, intelligent person should be asking, how are they going to achieve that? If that is one of their goals and they're going to work toward that goal, then who are the victims going to be, and how are they going to choose who lives and dies?
I find it hard to believe is because they don't hear it from any other source. You're not going to hear it in the media. You're not going to hear it from the government leaders. You're not going to hear it from the people who, in fact, are creating it. That's the thing. And so they don't realize how far it has gone.
Well, people don't know much about sustainable development because major media is really captured by the same interests that control the banking institutions. Our public information systems have been bought up or have been taken control over by these forces that seek the creation of this one world where human beings become chattel to the ruling elite. And it seems that there have been plenty of people signing up to become slave masters and keep this information undercover.
The loss of freedom is not being imposed on most people in the Western world, not being imposed by force of arms with bayonets, guns, or bombs, but with propaganda.
They've convinced us that what's on the cover of the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Globe and Mail, the Toronto Star, or on CBC Nightly News with Peter Mansbridge, if he's still around or alive, it has to be the truth. And everything else, thus, as a result, is a conspiracy. Because if what I'm saying is the truth, it obviously would be on the front cover of the Toronto Star. Well, it can't, because the media forms part of the world elite.
The purpose of a media in a democracy is to inform the electorate. Their job is to be a watchdog on the government. Well, we have a media that's prostituted itself totally to an agenda. And not only in terms of what it promotes, but in terms of what it hides. The real truth was hidden to the American people, still is. It's an incredibly well-organized propaganda machine.
The empires, they control people, or they manipulate people by making sure they control how people think. And this is exactly what they've done so very, very well. Because again, the greatest hypnotist in the world is this oblong box everyone has in their living room called the television set, which has taught us to eat, to think, to dress, to walk, to talk, We know more about the lives of Britney Spears than we know the lives about our spouses.
It's a gradual progression from well-intentioned people who simply want world peace to those that embrace pantheistic concepts, and ultimately a small percentage of those